The gleaming ships of the Varian Collective darkened Earth's skies on a quiet Tuesday morning in 2137. Admiral Todd I stood tall on the observation deck of his flagship, his eyes fixed on the blue planet below. Earth looked small and fragile from this distance. Taiwan had seen many worlds before, but something about this one made him pause. Such a small world for such a noisy species, he remarked, not turning as Science Officer Sung Min approached. Sung Min stepped beside his commander, his uniform perfectly pressed despite their long journey. They've only achieved rudimentary space travel, Admiral. Their technology is centuries behind ours. He adjusted settings on his scanner, frowning slightly at the readings. Though their adaptability index is unusually high, Taiwan dismissed this observation with a casual wave of his hand. The gesture was practiced, one he had used on a dozen worlds before. All species adapt. Few survive first contact with the collective. The Varian ships had positioned themselves strategically around Earth's orbit. Smaller scout vessels descended into the atmosphere, causing panic in cities worldwide. The ships didn't attack. They simply watched, scanned, and waited. On Earth, the response was chaos at first. Stock markets crashed. Religious groups proclaimed the end times. Military forces worldwide went to their highest alert status. But after 3 days of the visitors simply hovering, a strange calm began to settle. Nations scrambled to form a unified response council. Old enemies set aside differences in the face of this unknown threat. The United Earth Council was established in just 5 days, breaking all previous records for international cooperation. Dr. Hannah Park sat in her laboratory, surrounded by screens displaying Varian transmission data. As Earth's leading xenobiologist, she had been appointed head of the scientific team analyzing the alien communications. Dark circles under her eyes showed she hadn't slept properly since the ships arrived. "The translation matrix is finally working," she told her assistant. "Their language uses tonal shifts we can't even hear, but the computer can process them." When the Varians had finally opened communications, their message was simple. "We come in peace. We wish to share knowledge." World leaders cautiously welcomed this. Trade talks began. The Varians offered medical technology that could cure several human diseases. In return, they asked only for cultural exchange and the right to establish small outposts. It seemed too good to be true. Dr. Park thought it was. "They're hiding something," she told General Kehoe at their third briefing in the underground Seoul Command Center. She pushed her data tablet across the table to him. "Their technology signals suggest military capabilities far beyond what they're showing us." Kehoe studied the data, his weathered face growing more serious with each swipe of the screen. He had fought in 3 wars during his long career, but nothing had prepared him for this. "How certain are you?" "The energy readings from their ships are off the charts, General. The medical technology they've shared is impressive to us, but it's child's play to them. They're holding back at least 95% of their capabilities." Kehoe nodded grimly. "Keep monitoring. I'll alert the Security Council." The general wasn't the only one with suspicions. Lieutenant Jin A of Earth Intelligence had been tracking unusual energy signatures around military installations worldwide. Young but brilliant, Jin A had noticed patterns that her superiors had missed. "The signals peak every 6 hours," she explained to her team, pointing to the data map. "Always when our satellite coverage has gaps." She zoomed in on a region near a major missile silo. "They're scanning our defenses systematically." Jin A's discovery came just as the Varians proposed their first major diplomatic summit. Admiral Taiwan himself would meet with Earth's leaders. The summit would be held in neutral Switzerland, with representatives from all major nations. The night before the summit, Jin A broke into Dr. Park's lab. "Doctor, you need to see this," she said, plugging her drive into Park's computer. "I've been tracking Varian movements for weeks." Dr. Park watched as the data showed clear patterns of Varian ships positioning themselves near every major military installation on Earth. "They're mapping our defenses while smiling through diplomatic channels." "Exactly," Jin A said. "And there's more. Their communications include encrypted channels we haven't been able to crack until now. She typed rapidly, bringing up a decoded message. They're reporting back to someone. Someone far away. The message was clear. Stage 1 complete. Defense assessment finalized. Awaiting authorization for Stage 2. Dr. Park felt cold fear spread through her body. We need to warn the summit. But it was already too late. The Varians had been monitoring Earth's communications too. As Jin A and Dr. Park raced to contact General Kai-ho, Varian ships across the globe shifted position. Their peaceful facade was about to drop. Admiral Ta-1 stood before his bridge crew, his expression unreadable. The collective has approved our assessment. Earth's resources will make a fine addition. He turned to his weapons officer. Begin preparations for Stage 2. The humans have had enough time to hope. On Earth, Jin A and Dr. Park reached the general just as the first reports came in of Varian ships moving into attack positions. The peaceful visitors had shown their true faces. They never wanted diplomacy, Jin A said. This was always about conquest. As night fell across much of Earth, the people below had no idea that everything would change by morning. The Varian collective had set their plans in motion. Humanity's greatest challenge was about to begin. 6 months passed after the arrival of the Varian ships. During this time, they established what they called cultural exchange centers in major cities around the world. Humans flocked to these centers, fascinated by glimpses of alien technology. The Varians offered medical treatments for previously incurable diseases, though they always held back their most advanced capabilities. Admiral Ta-1 watched Earth's behavior from his command ship. The humans had grown comfortable with the Varian presence. Their initial fear had been replaced by curiosity and hope. This was exactly as he had planned. The incorporation assessment is complete, his second-in-command reported. The collective leadership has transmitted their approval. Ta-1 nodded, reviewing the attack plan on his display. Their defenses are primitive. Their weapons cannot penetrate our shields. This will be swift. Some advisors suggest a warning, Admiral, to reduce resistance. Ta-1's expression hardened. No warnings. Warnings invite preparation. Begin the incorporation process immediately. The attack began at dawn in East Asia. Varian ships positioned themselves over major cities and military installations. There was no declaration of war, no ultimatum. The first kinetic rods, simple metal cylinders accelerated to tremendous speeds, struck Shul with the force of small nuclear weapons, but without radiation. Jin-A was at the Seoul Command Center when the first impact shook the building. Alarms blared as officers scrambled to understand what was happening. Multiple impacts reported worldwide, shouted a communications officer. Washington, Beijing, Moscow. They're hitting everyone. General Kai-ho entered the command room, his uniform hastily donned. Status report. Before anyone could answer, the building shook again. Dust rained from the ceiling. The lights flickered and went out, replaced seconds later by dim emergency lighting. Direct hit on the east wing, someone called. Jin-A rushed to the general. Sir, we need to evacuate. This facility is compromised. Kai-ho's face was grim as he studied the rapidly updating damage reports. They timed this perfectly. Simultaneous strikes worldwide. He looked up at the young lieutenant. Find Dr. Park. Her research may be our only advantage now. Jin-A found Dr. Hana Park in her lab, frantically downloading data as the building continued to shake around them. Doctor, we need to evacuate now. Jin-A shouted over the noise. Hana didn't look up. Almost done. This data is our only hope. The ceiling above them groaned. Jin-A grabbed Hana's arm. No time. They barely made it to the doorway when the ceiling collapsed. Jin-A threw herself over the scientist as debris crashed around them. For several minutes they lay in darkness, choking on dust. Jin-A eventually pushed herself up, checking Hana for injuries. Are you hurt? Hana coughed, clutching a small data drive in her fist. I'm okay. The data is safe. They crawled through the wreckage, finding the hallway partially blocked but passable. Emergency lights flickered weakly, casting eerie shadows. They could hear moans from trapped personnel in other rooms. "We need to help them," Hannah said, turning toward the sounds. Jin-A grabbed her arm. "We can't. The building is coming down. Your research is too important." As they made their way through the crumbling command center, they passed monitors still receiving emergency broadcasts. On one screen, Admiral Ta-One's face appeared, his expression cold and triumphant. "People of Earth," his voice echoed through emergency channels worldwide. "Your planet is now part of the Varian Collective. Surrender your weapons and accept resource quotas. Resistance will be met with further cleansing." Outside, the sky was dark with smoke and dust. Seoul was burning. Varian ships hovered above the city, occasionally firing at targets below. Jin-A and Hannah crouched behind a fallen wall, watching as smaller Varian vessels landed, deploying troops. They'd hit every major military installation. Jin-A coughed through the dust, pulling Hannah down as a Varian patrol passed nearby. Hannah clutched the data drive tightly. "Not everyone," she replied quietly. "The mountain bunkers in Gangwon were designed to withstand nuclear strikes, and I've been analyzing their shield frequencies." Jin-A looked at her with new hope. "You found something." "Maybe. Their shields operate on a specific frequency pattern. If we can match it, we might be able to penetrate them." Hannah looked at the burning city around them. "But I need the equipment in Gangwon to finish the analysis." In the distance, they heard the sound of an engine. Jin-A peered carefully around their cover and saw a military transport, damaged but still operational, moving slowly through the debris. "That's our ride," she said, recognizing the driver as one of Kehoe's trusted officers. She helped Hannah to her feet. "Then that's where we go. The fight has just begun." They moved carefully through the ruins, avoiding Varian patrols. The air was thick with smoke, making it hard to breathe. All around them, people stumbled through the destruction, shocked and injured. "We should help them," Hannah said, watching a woman carrying a crying child. Jin-A's face hardened. "The best way to help them is to find a way to fight back. We can't save everyone today." They reached the transport, which was filled with wounded soldiers and a few other key personnel who had escaped the command center. The driver recognized Jin-A and quickly let them aboard. As the transport rumbled away from the burning city, heading toward the mountains, Jin-A looked back at Seoul. The beautiful city she had grown up in was now a smoking ruin. Varian ships continued their methodical destruction, targeting any signs of military resistance. 20%, said an officer reviewing reports on a tablet. "They've reduced our military capability by at least 20% in the first hour alone." Hannah sat beside Jin-A, her face streaked with dust and blood. "It will get worse before it gets better," she said quietly. Jin-A nodded, her hands tightening into fists. "But it will get better. They think they've won already. That's their mistake." The transport continued into the mountains, carrying with it a small flame of resistance that would soon grow into humanity's fiercest fire. 3 years passed under Varian occupation. The aliens had divided Earth into sectors, each controlled by a Varian governor. They built massive extraction facilities to mine Earth's resources. Humans were forced to work in these facilities. Those who refused disappeared. The Varians believed they had broken humanity's spirit. They were wrong. Deep within the Gangwon Mountains, the main resistance base hummed with activity. What had once been a small military bunker had grown into an underground city. Tunnels stretched for miles, connecting living quarters, training facilities, workshops, and command centers. Commander Jin-A walked through the central command room, her footsteps echoing on the metal floor. She was no longer the young lieutenant who had escaped Seoul. Her face was harder now, marked with a scar that ran from her right eye to her jaw, a reminder of a close encounter with Varian forces. She stopped at the main holographic display, studying attack patterns across Asia. Various resistance cells appeared as blue dots against the red variant strongholds. The Gangnam cell disrupted their supply line again, she told the assembled resistance leaders, pointing to a blinking indicator near Old Seoul. That's the third time this month. An older man with a gray beard nodded. My people report minimal casualties. They've captured more of their communication tech. Jin-A allowed herself a small smile. Good work, Commander Dae-sung. Your team continues to impress. 3 years of fighting had taught them important lessons. Direct attacks failed. The Varians had superior weapons and impenetrable shields, but they were overconfident and followed predictable patterns. The Resistance used this against them, striking supply lines, conducting quick raids, and disappearing before the Varians could respond. What about the Western Front? Asked a woman with short hair and a cybernetic left arm. Jin-A switched the display to show Europe, still struggling after the Barcelona incident, but Commander Minju reports they're rebuilding. The Barcelona incident had been a harsh lesson. A resistance cell had been discovered, and the Varians responded by leveling the entire city. Over 1 million people died. The Resistance learned to be more careful after that. Across the room, Dr. Hannah Park worked with her team of scientists. Her lab was separated from the command center by a glass wall. Inside, dozens of researchers analyzed variant technology captured in raids. Hannah looked older too. Her once black hair now had streaks of gray, and glasses perched permanently on her nose. But her eyes still shone with the same determination Jin-A had seen in the ruins of Seoul 3 years ago. The scientists communicated with others around the world through secure quantum channels, technology developed from studying variant communications. Similar bunkers existed on every continent, each specializing in different aspects of variant tech. Jin-A finished her briefing and walked to the lab. She placed her hand on the scanner, and the door slid open. Any progress? She asked. Hannah looked up from her work, pushing her glasses back up her nose. Actually, yes. Significant progress. She motioned Jin-A to follow her to a central workstation where a piece of variant shield technology had been partially disassembled. Its inner components pulsed with a blue light. We've been studying this shield generator for months, Hannah explained, and we finally found something interesting. She typed commands into a nearby console, and a wave pattern appeared on the screen. Their shield systems have a pulse frequency vulnerability. It recycles every 17.3 seconds. Jin-A studied the pattern. What does that mean for us? Before Hannah could answer, a young man approached from another workstation. This was Young-ho, formerly a software engineer before the invasion, now one of their best weapons specialists. His right arm was a variant prosthetic, salvaged from a damaged combat drone and modified for human use. It means we might have a way to beat their shields, he said, excitement clear in his voice. If we can synchronize an electromagnetic pulse to that exact frequency, we could penetrate their shields. Hannah finished. All of them. Simultaneously. Jin-A felt her heart rate increase. For 3 years, they had been fighting a guerrilla war, never able to take on the Varians directly because of those shields. This could change everything. Are you certain? She asked, not daring to hope. Hannah nodded. We've tested it on 3 different shield generators. It works every time. Young-ho gestured with his prosthetic arm. The pulse has to be precisely timed. Too early or too late, and the shield absorbs it. But if we hit it at exactly 17.3 seconds into its cycle, the shield collapses for approximately 2.4 seconds. That's our window, Hannah added. 2.4 seconds to get through. Jin-A approached the scientists. How soon can you weaponize this? Hannah and Young-ho exchanged glances. 2 months, Hannah replied. Maybe less with the parts from the variant transport Young-ho's team captured last week. Jin-A nodded, her mind already racing with possibilities. Then we prepare for Operation Stormbreak. It's time humanity showed the Varians exactly what they've unleashed. The news spread quickly through the resistance network. For the first time in 3 years, they had a real chance against the Varians. The mood in the bunker shifted from grim determination to cautious hope. That night, Jin-A stood in her small private quarters, looking at a worn photograph of her family. They had been in Busan when the attacks began. She never found out what happened to them. A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. It was Hana. "I thought you'd want to see this," the scientist said, handing Jin-A a small device. Young-ho finished the prototype. Jin-A took the device. It looked simple, just a small metal box with a digital timer. "This little thing can disable their shields?" she asked. Hana nodded. "It's just a prototype. The final version will be more powerful. But this works. We tested it." Jin-A carefully placed the device on her desk. "We'll need hundreds of these." "Thousands," Hana corrected. "And we'll need to coordinate with every resistance cell worldwide. The attack must be simultaneous, or the Varians will adapt." Jin-A looked at her old friend. "Can we really do this, Hana? Can we actually win?" Hana's tired face broke into a rare smile. 3 years ago, they thought they'd break us in months. They were wrong then. They're still wrong. She pointed at the prototype. "That's proof that human ingenuity can overcome even the most advanced technology." Jin-A turned back to the photograph of her family. "Operation Stormbreak begins now. Let's show the Varians what happens when you back humans into a corner." Operation Stormbreak began at dawn. The rising sun cast long shadows across the ruins of Seoul as resistance fighters moved into position. They wore simple armor made from modified Varian materials and carried weapons that were strange hybrids of human and alien technology. Commander Jin-A crouched behind a fallen building, watching the massive Varian command facility. It stood 15 stories tall, a gleaming tower of metal and strange materials that seemed to shift colors in the morning light. A shimmering energy field surrounded it, the shield that had made Varian structures impossible to attack for 3 years. "All teams in position," came a voice through her earpiece. Jin-A checked her weapon one last time. It had been built by Young-ho himself, a human rifle modified with Varian energy components. "Remember, we have exactly 2.4 seconds after the shields drop. Move fast." Similar scenes played out in 37 locations around the world. In London, Moscow, New York, Beijing, and everywhere the Varians had established command centers, resistance fighters waited. The attack had to be perfectly synchronized. Jin-A checked her watch. 1 minute to go. She took a deep breath, thinking of all that had led to this moment. 3 years of hiding. 3 years of watching Earth's resources stripped away. 3 years of planning. Young-ho's voice came through her comm unit. "Shield disruptors ready. All global teams reporting ready status." "Proceed," Jin-A ordered. Young-ho began the countdown. Firing in 3, 2, 1. Small devices positioned around the Varian facility activated simultaneously. They emitted no visible light or sound, but their effect was immediate. The shimmering shield surrounding the building flickered, wavered, and then disappeared completely. "Go," Jin-A shouted, springing from cover. Her team rushed forward, moving with practiced precision. They had exactly 2.4 seconds to breach the building before the shields would reset. Resistance fighters used grappling lines to reach higher floors, while others rushed through the main entrance. Jin-A led the central team through the front doors. The Varian guards inside were caught completely by surprise. They had relied on their shields for so long that their internal security was minimal. "Upper floors secured," reported another team leader through the comm. Jin-A pushed forward, cutting through the building toward the central command room. Varians tried to stop them, but their weapons were no match for the modified guns the humans carried. "They never thought we could reverse engineer their technology," Young-ho said as he disabled a security checkpoint. Jin-A nodded. Their biggest mistake was thinking they knew what humans are capable of. In orbit above Earth, Admiral Ta-1 sat in his command chair aboard the Varian flagship. Over the past 3 years, he had been promoted to Supreme Governor of Earth, overseeing the planet's incorporation into the collective. A junior officer approached, looking nervous. "Supreme Governor, we're receiving alarming reports from the surface." Tai-1 frowned. "More resistance attacks. Handle it as usual. Destroy any settlement near the attack site." "Sir, it's different this time. They've breached the command centers." "Impossible," Tai-1 muttered, rising from his chair. "Show me." The main screen activated, showing feeds from multiple command facilities around the planet. At each location, the shields were down. Human forces were storming inside. These primitives couldn't possibly. Tai-1 began, but stopped as facility after facility reported security breaches. "Shoal Command Center is not responding," an officer reported. Tai-1 slammed his fist on the console. "Send in the reserve forces, all of them." Inside the Seoul facility, Jin-A and her team fought their way to the 11th floor where the command center was located. The resistance fighters moved with deadly efficiency, using tactics they had perfected in 3 years of hit-and-run attacks. "Command center ahead," Jin-A's second-in-command reported. "Heavy security." Jin-A signaled to a soldier carrying a special weapon, a modified Varian energy cannon. "Clear the way." The weapon fired, and the doors to the command center disintegrated. Jin-A led the charge through the smoke. Inside, Varian officers scrambled for weapons. At the center of the room stood Governor Do-hyun, the local administrator who had overseen the brutal occupation of the Korean peninsula. "How did you?" he began, but Jin-A didn't let him finish. A single shot from her weapon left him lying on the floor. "Secure the room," she ordered. As her team rounded up the remaining Varians, Jin-A activated her comm unit. "Command center secured. Dr. Park, you're clear to enter." Dr. Hana arrived minutes later, carrying specialized equipment. She immediately went to the main control console. "Their systems are more advanced than the ones we've studied," she said, connecting her devices to the alien technology. "But the basic principles are the same." Jin-A stood guard as Hana worked. Through her comm unit, she heard reports from around the world. Moscow secured. London secured. Beijing facing heavy resistance but pushing forward. "I'm in," Hana announced after several tense minutes. "I've tapped into their orbital network." Jin-A allowed herself a small smile. "Can you access their defense platforms?" Hana nodded, her fingers moving rapidly over the alien interface. "They converted our orbital satellites for their own use. Now I'm converting them back." Across the room, a captured Varian officer laughed. "Your resistance is impressive but futile. Our fleet remains in orbit. They will simply level this entire area." As if in response to his words, the building shook. Jin-A looked out the window to see Varian dropships descending. "Hana, we're running out of time." "Almost there," Hana replied, not looking up from her work. Then her face lit up with triumph. "I've gained control of their orbital platforms," she announced through the Global Resistance Channel, redirecting against Varian ships. Now, in space, Earth's captured defense satellites turned against their masters. Dozens of orbital platforms, originally built by humans, then enhanced with Varian technology, suddenly swiveled toward the Varian fleet. They fired simultaneously. The Varian ships, caught by surprise, had no time to raise their shields. Several erupted in silent explosions against the backdrop of stars. On his flagship, Tai-1 watched in horror as his fleet was decimated by Earth's own defense systems. "Impossible," he whispered again, but this time with fear in his voice. Back in Seoul, Jin-A received the best news of the day. Admiral Tai-1's shuttle is attempting to reach the surface. Interception teams are in place. 1 hour later, the Supreme Governor of Earth was brought into the Seoul Command Center in restraints. His elegant uniform was torn, and blood trickled from a cut on his face. Jin-A approached him slowly. This was the architect of humanity's suffering, the commander who had ordered the destruction of Earth's cities. "Governor Tai-1, she said, leveling the captured Varian weapon at him. Earth formally rejects your incorporation. Taiwan looked at her with contempt. You cannot win. The collective spans 100 worlds. When they learn what has happened, they will send a force that will make our initial invasion seem merciful by comparison. Jin-A smiled coldly. We're counting on it. Taiwan's expression changed to confusion. You want them to come? Jin-A nodded to Dr. Hana, who activated the main screen. It showed Varian ships in orbit being systematically destroyed by Earth's reclaimed defenses. 3 years, Jin-A said quietly. 3 years you gave us to study your technology, to adapt it, to improve it. Taiwan watched in disbelief. You've doomed yourselves, he said. The collective will send 100 ships to replace each one you destroy. Jin-A stepped closer to him. We're counting on it. The Varian reinforcement fleet arrived 1 month after Operation Stormbreak. Earth's sensors detected them emerging from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the solar system. The fleet was massive, over 300 ships, each larger than the vessels humanity had defeated before. Jin-A stood in the rebuilt Seoul Command Center, watching the fleet's approach on the main screen. The room had been transformed. Varian technology now blended with human innovations, creating systems more advanced than either civilization had used before. They had brought their entire regional fleet, said Yumho, studying the sensor readings, just as we hoped they would. Jin-A nodded. After capturing Taiwan, they had allowed a single Varian vessel to escape. That ship carried news of the defeat back to the collective, along with a hidden message. A challenge. Are the satellites in position? Jin-A asked. Dr. Hana looked up from her console. All 37 FTL disruption satellites are active and ready. The moment they try to jump to Earth orbit, we'll have them. These satellites were Dr. Hana's greatest achievement. By studying the Varian faster-than-light drives, she had discovered a way to disrupt their function within a specific area. Any Varian ship attempting to use FTL travel within Earth's solar system would find itself stranded in normal space. Their increasing speed, reported a sensor operator. Estimated arrival in Earth orbit, 12 hours. Jin-A turned to the room full of resistance commanders. This is what we've been waiting for. Begin final preparations. Around the world, defensive systems activated. Captured Varian weapons platforms, now enhanced by human engineers, turned toward space. Fighters prepared to launch. Everything humanity had learned in 3 years of occupation was about to be put to the ultimate test. The Varian fleet approached with confidence. They had conquered many worlds before Earth. They had never failed. Their ships moved into position for the final FTL jump that would bring them directly into Earth orbit, surrounding the planet. Dr. Hana watched the fleet's movements on her screen. They're preparing to jump. Now, the FTL disruption satellites activated simultaneously. As the Varian ships attempted to enter faster-than-light travel, they instead found themselves trapped in normal space, still hours away from Earth. It worked, Yumho shouted. They're stuck exactly where we want them. Jin-A allowed herself a small smile. Open communications with their flagship. On the main screen, the image of the approaching fleet was replaced by the face of a Varian officer. His skin was pale gray, and his uniform was more elaborate than Taiwan's, signifying higher rank. This is Commander Jin-A of the Human Defense Force, Jin-A said, her voice steady and confident. Your occupation force has been neutralized. You have 2 options, peaceful withdrawal or total war. The Varian commander's face showed only slight surprise at being addressed by a human. I am Supreme Commander Da-hyun of the Collective Expansion Force. Your resistance is noted but irrelevant. You are merely postponing the inevitable. The collective has conquered 100 worlds. Jin-A gestured, and the feed showed captured Admiral Ta-1, now being brought into the command center under guard. Tell him what you've learned, Admiral, Jin-A said. Taiwan looked directly at his superior. The past month in human custody had changed him. He had watched as humans not only used variant technology, but improved upon it in ways his people had never considered. "They've not only mastered our technology, Commander," Ta once said, his voice heavy with resignation. "They've improved it. Their adaptability exceeds all models. We made a critical error in judgment." Da Hyun's expression hardened. "You speak from coercion or fear, Admiral. The collective will not be deterred by primitive tricks." Jin A cut the communication. "They need a demonstration," she said. "Target their advanced scouts with Orbital Platform 3. Earth's reclaimed and enhanced orbital weapons fired." 3 Varian scout ships, approaching ahead of the main fleet, erupted in silent explosions. "Reopen communications," Jin A ordered. Da Hyun's face appeared again, now showing clear anger. "This action constitutes war against the collective. We will respond accordingly." "You started this war," Jin A replied calmly. "We're simply ending it. This is your final chance for peaceful withdrawal." Da Hyun cut the communication. Moments later, the Varian fleet began to advance toward Earth at sublight speed. "They're coming in hot," Yumho reported. "All ships charging weapons." Jin A nodded. "Activate all defense systems. Let's show them what humanity is capable of." The battle that followed would later be known as the Liberation of Earth. As the Varian fleet approached, they found themselves facing weapons of their own design, now modified and improved by human ingenuity. Earth's orbital platforms fired first, their energy beams more powerful and accurate than the Varians had ever seen. The Varian ships attempted to raise their shields, but found them less effective against the modified weapons. The human defenders had spent 3 years studying those shields, finding weaknesses the Varians themselves didn't know existed. When the collective attempted one final desperate assault, directing all their remaining ships in a concentrated attack on North America, they lost half their fleet in less than a day. Earth's defense systems, coordinated through the captured command centers, predicted their every move. 2 days later, Supreme Commander Da Hyun requested to reopen communications. His uniform was torn, and smoke filled the background of his command bridge. "The collective," he began, then paused, visibly struggling with the words. "The collective proposes a cessation of hostilities." Jin A studied him carefully. "The terms are simple. Complete withdrawal from Earth and our solar system. Recognition of human sovereignty. Reparations for the damage you've caused." Da Hyun looked as if he might refuse, but a nearby explosion rocked his ship. "Agreed," he said finally. "I am authorized to sign on behalf of the collective." The Treaty of Earth was signed that day, marking the first defeat the Varian collective had ever experienced. As the Varian ships retreated, Jin A and Hannah stood on the observation deck of Earth's first true starship, built with enhanced Varian technology. Through the massive viewport, they watched the stars, no longer just distant points of light, but potential destinations. "They thought they found an easy conquest," Hannah said, watching the stars. Jin A nodded. "Instead, they unleash humanity into the galaxy." She turned to her friend with a determined smile. "I almost feel sorry for what the rest of the universe is about to experience." In the decades that followed, the Human Defensive Alliance expanded rapidly across nearby star systems. Earth's ships, built using improved Varian technology, were faster and more powerful than anything the collective had ever created. Humanity established colonies, made contact with other species, and began to create a new interstellar community based on mutual respect rather than conquest. The Varian collective, once the dominant power in the sector, found itself diminished and humbled. Their defeat at Earth became a turning point in their history, forcing them to reconsider their approach to other civilizations. And across the galaxy, a new saying spread among spacefaring species who witnessed humanity's rapid rise: "Only fools provoke the fury of Earth."